Welcome to Masters of Masking, the podcast for and about those who've discovered they're neurodivergent later in life. Join us as we dive into the lives of individuals with autism, ADHD, CPTSD and more. Hear their stories, learn about their challenges and celebrate their triumphs. Living, loving and thriving in their unique everyday lives. You're not alone, let's unmask the extraordinary together. Masters of Masking, tune in and embrace the journey. Hello and welcome to Masters of Masking. This is the podcast where we will be talking about neurodivergence, masking with neurodivergence, and largely finding out that you are neurodivergent later in life. I chose to set up this podcast when I realised that in my world I have so many people who are spicy and interesting and are starting to learn, as we all are, so much more about neurodivergence and being on the spectrum, as it were, and starting to realise, as I say, there are so many people in my world and how the challenges come up. And I'd like to tell you a little bit more about my own personal story today, just so that you know where this project has come from and why I chose to set it up. But also really just to tell you a little bit more about the podcast in general. I really love have the podcast set up in both English and in Spanish. I live in Spanish, I live in Spain, I live in a household where we speak Spanish 97% of the time. And if you are here or you know of anybody who would be interested and willing to come on and talk about their own experiences in Spanish, then that would be fabulous and I would love to hear from them. But also the guests that I've got lined up for subsequent episodes, I'm really excited to bring on. At the moment, most of them are women who will share their stories, and hopefully it will help people to navigate perhaps the situations that come up, because we are all different, but when there's neurodiversity in the mix, there are so many patterns that fall about that are very similar. And obviously, hopefully listening to other people's stories and the way that they've helped themselves and found their way through the world could be just what you need to move through. And it's also a space, I think, where even if you're not neurodivergent yourself, it's somewhere that you can really listen and learn about the situations that people go through and maybe be a little bit more tolerant or help you to be a little bit more understanding of the people that are around you with the fall into the neurodivergent category. So, without further ado, my name is Judith McFadden. I am a change transformation therapist. I have been working with people's bodies and minds for almost 30 years. And I have always been extremely physical. I've always been extremely inquisitive. I've always been a bit odd. I remember from a very early age not really feeling very much like I fitted in anywhere. And that's something that stayed with me my entire life now at 50. And it's only really been this year that I have been led to not the neurodivergent scale, because a couple of years ago was my ADHD, not diagnosis, because I chose not to go for an ADHD diagnosis. But when Aspiegirl's, which is now classed as on the autism scale, it's not called just Aspiegirl's anymore. But when Aspie was introduced to me, it really hit me very in a kind of cold goosebump kind of a way. And funnily enough, it was introduced to me by my 29-year-old daughter, who has been going through the process herself of getting a later life diagnosis for ADHD first of all, and secondly autism. So it was quite interesting in the way that it came to me one day, and this really hit home with me when I said the words out loud, that when I discovered that I probably had ADHD, that explained so much. But when I really looked into and heard about the Asperger's and all of the traits that go with Asperger's, that just completely explained who I am. And that was earlier this year. And that was quite a profound few weeks, and so much started to make sense. So much started to make sense from when I was a child, from my previous relationship, from motherhood. Obviously, my daughter was the one who presented me with a possibility, and there was a big chunk of my behaviour in motherhood with that. And I know a lot of people struggle with the fact that they've been given that. I haven't struggled with it remotely. It's given me a sense of relief. It's given me a sense of satisfaction. It's almost made me lean into a little bit more my differences, because I've always known that they're unique. I've always known that there's been a pattern recognition there, an ability to see deeper, an ability to perceive things that other people don't perceive, and now I understand why. So for me, it has been very much a clarifying, and I'm not quite sure of the word. It's almost kind of cementing who I am, and it's been really, really nice. I've really enjoyed it. But obviously, when we look at the word masking and how people mask, when I realised just how much I've masked my entire life and how tiring that process is, and how unreal it is, it's not authentic, because you're not really showing yourself to the people who, you're always putting on a performance to make sure everything goes okay. You're performing, and I don't mean performing in an acting role. I mean performing as in to get things done. It's like a sports performance. And it is tiring on the nervous system. And what really, the ADHD that kind of came to my attention a couple of years ago was when I was starting to really struggle with cognitive function and brain fog. And the perimenopause thing really kind of messed up a lot of my kind of processes. And I've tried all the supplements that I would do, and, restoring gut and brain health. And I've been through all of these holistic, natural processes. And then you start to look at things like rejection sensitivity disorder. There's lots of letters, and there's lots of comorbid situations that can come up when one has autism, and I am now able to look at so many things and kind of be like, oh, I just can't do that right now, and there's a different way that maybe I need to approach it, or I need to ask for help with it. So the process of realizing and being diagnosed with Asperger's autism has been very enlightening for me, and it allowed me to become even more accepting of myself and my behaviors than I probably was before. And I think a big chunk of how I function is I've spent many years working on trauma, doing inner child work, breath work, regulating my nervous system. And there were so many things there that I'd worked on, and I know I'd worked on, and I do this work with people, so I know sometimes you can't always get to the crux of it, and you have to keep layers, and you have to keep working through the layers. But there was some things that just I wasn't getting to, and now I get it. I understand why, and I can go to a different angle with it. But I'm very clear and aware that a big part of being on the spectrum, there's trauma there just because your brain functions differently. So, the way that we react to situations or scenarios, that in itself, with the rejection sensitivity disorder, I'm just talking with this specific one at the moment, that can bring about so much trauma that's not even, it wouldn't necessarily be considered trauma with a capital T. It would be traumatic, but potentially an atypical person would just kind of be like, oh yeah, okay, I can get on with it. Whereas a person who has, a brain that functions differently can take something so personally and feel so uncomfortable, and to the point of physical pain, all at the base of being rejected or not feeling wanted or not feeling like they belong. So with people who are on the spectrum, and especially finding out that you're on the spectrum later on in life, there are so many roots of trauma that have already happened in their life just because they're alive. And a lot of my work now is helping people to really connect with that and, make peace with it, and help them to learn and utilize the tools that are there. Because part of the issue with the way our brains function is we can have all the tools, but we forget to use them. And we can have all of the tools there, but we can get so overwhelmed that just, the thought of doing an extra day journaling or can be can just be too much. So on the other end of the scale, we can hyper focus on the healing journey and go all in on our healing, which is fabulous and wonderful. But then other things might not get done, So there's like real life living and feeding the children and making sure you earn enough money and all of those things. So it's about finding a fine line and a balance. And I'm really looking forward to bringing the conversations that we're going to be having over the coming months to you. And I really hope that the conversations we have will inspire and heal, really, is the aim of what I would like this podcast to be about. So talking about people's forms of and feeling the need to mask, hide who they are, pretend to be something else, put on a performance to make sure everything works as it should do, and maybe help the people who are listening and also the people who are talking, because I know personally the more we talk about these things, the more we process. And as I talk to the people who we've come up with on this program, we can talk about similarities and things, sensitivities, and we've had quite a lot of light bulb moments pop up as we've been having a conversation, and it's like, oh my goodness, I did not realize that was part of my neurodivergent trait. So hopefully as you go through the months and you listen to the episodes, you will have some light bulb moments too. And hopefully that will bring about some healing and some self-love and self-acceptance and everything else that comes with learning and getting to know yourself better. So that's what Masters of Masking is about. And that was my goal in life. So I really, really hope that we fulfill that goal. And if you would like to participate in any way, shape, or form in our podcast, please do reach out. All the contact details are there. And I look forward to getting to know you better. Thank you for joining us today. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode, and subscribe to us for future episodes where we will talk about more things neurodivergent and everything that goes with that. And if you want to know a little bit more about what Judith does, check out the website on www.becomingyouinsideout.com and everything to do with nervous system regulation and healing.